Today is Saturday, September 16th. The first official day of fall is just 1 week away, and this is the season viral infections tend to peak. So what can you expect this year when it comes to COVID, the flu, and RSV? Today, we're talking with epidemiologist Dr. Katelyn Jetelina. You may know her from social media or her popular Substack newsletter, Your Local Epidemiologist. She's here to share her insights on the updated COVID-19 vaccine that was just approved earlier this week and should be available where you are either now or soon. We go over a lot, including what parents may want to keep in mind and one thing to do if you're planning to get the COVID and flu shots at the same time. We also talk about flu season and the new tools for RSV. All of that and more coming up. Welcome to the Newsworthy Special Edition Saturday, when we sit down with a different expert or celebrity every Saturday to talk about something in the news. Don't forget to tune in every Monday through Friday for our regular episodes, where we provide all the day's news in 10 minutes. I'm Erica Mandy. It's now time for today's Special Edition Saturday. Katelyn Jetelina, thank you so much for joining us here on the Newsworthy once again.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. Excited to be here.
So first, I would love to just get a quick update on the state of COVID-19 in the U.S. right now.
Right now, we are currently experiencing a wave of infections. This is coming off of the summer of a kind of a variant soup of changing behaviors because of heat. Omicron, since about 2 years ago, continues to mutate in these small incremental changes. And we want that. We don't want some random mutation out of nowhere coming by like Delta, because that allows us to kind of predict where this virus is going and allow us to a proactive response like we're doing right now with fall vaccines.
What did Moderna and Pfizer do to come up with this latest version?
Yeah, so the United States is kind of taking the approach we do with the flu model, is that early in February, our FDA kind of meets and tries to predict what the U.S. population will see in the upcoming fall season. It looks like their guess back in February was the right one, that we needed an Omicron updated formula for our vaccines, and it's specifically targeting XBB, which is the latest subvariant that's kind of sweeping the United States. Once the FDA decides what variant strain, they tell the manufacturers, they tell Pfizer, Novavax, Moderna, what they should be testing in a lab to make sure that the vaccines work, as well as what they should be testing on the manufacturing lines to make sure that the vaccines they create are consistent. And so earlier this week, we heard the FDA fully approved Moderna and Pfizer, which means that all of their application, all of their data looked great. It sounds like they are still waiting on Novavax to get their application in.
And so this updated vaccine for COVID-19 is for everyone 6 months and older. What can you tell us about the effectiveness of these shots this year, as well as the safety, and if you think they are necessary for all of those age groups?
Yeah, that's right. The big news this week was that everyone over 6 months is eligible for an updated COVID-19 vaccine this fall, and I strongly agree with that. The CDC and FDA showed that the benefits of the vaccines greatly outweigh the risks across all age groups, which is important to me as a mom trying to decide whether her toddler should get the vaccine. We don't know how well the vaccines are working this fall because we are relying on lab data just like we do with flu data. We're making our best guess. But if we look to last fall, the vaccines worked pretty darn well with the last updated COVID-19 vaccine. About 60% effectiveness among kids and adults going to the emergency department or urgent care. About 65% effectiveness among hospitalizations. But of course, this waned over time. So we're happy with this, and these numbers are higher than what we see with the flu vaccine every year, which is promising. Safety-wise, it's also looking really good. One thing a lot on our parents' minds is myocarditis, and we saw last fall that myocarditis was not a safety signal like we saw with the primary series, and we think that's because the increased time interval between doses reduces risk.
Yeah, and I just want to expand a little bit on what you were talking about with parents deciding for their kids. Can you tell us a little bit more about what the data says about risks versus benefits and how you've gone about making that decision, how you recommend parents think about that decision?
We know that the burden of severe illness is lower among kids compared to adults, but it's not zero. In fact, infants, so those under 6 months, have the second highest rate of COVID-19 hospitalizations, right behind adults 75 years and older. So it's about the same severity as flu. And COVID-19 hospitalization rates are higher compared to other vaccine preventable diseases like chickenpox or hepatitis A, in which kids already get a vaccine for. The other thing that I think at least me as a parent finds helpful is there's secondary benefits to a vaccine. For example, a vaccine reduces the number of days your kids have symptoms, which is great to get them back in daycare for my sanity. Vaccines also reduce the chances of long COVID and reduces the chances of infection and transmission to, for example, grandparents in the short run. So there's a lot of benefits, particularly beyond severe disease for kids.
And any thoughts or differences between kids who have never gotten like the primary series or never been vaccinated versus kids who did get the previous shots and whether they should get the booster?
The guidance is a little different. So for those kids that have yet to get the COVID-19 vaccine, they're recommended to get 2 doses of the vaccine this fall. And the reason for that is just to ensure that their immune systems mount a very durable response, because they probably have a higher likelihood of being immune naive. Now, those kids that have already got the vaccine series or are over the age of 5, they just need 1 vaccine like the rest of us this fall.
Okay, so speaking of that, that's a key thing to know, that it's only 1 shot, regardless of whether you've gotten vaccinated in the past. It's 1 shot. Any other key things to know about this year that stands out to you?
A lot of people are wondering about mixing vaccines. So for example, should we wait for Novavax if we've had mRNA vaccines this entire time? My advice is just to get the vaccine that's most easily accessible.
And any difference between the Moderna and Pfizer shots so far?
No, not really. You may see a marginal benefit from mixing, for example, your entire Moderna series and then you get a Pfizer, vice versa, but the science is really mixed on this.
Okay, so the CDC says only about 17% of Americans got a COVID-19 booster shot last fall. Knowing that, well, first, what do you think of that percentage? And then also knowing that, what are you expecting this year and whether people will actually get the vaccine?
Yeah, that percentage is abysmal. I mean, if we compare it to flu vaccination rates, we get about 50 to 60% coverage every season. Given that COVID-19 is more contagious and more severe than flu, it's a big disappointment. The uptake this fall is kind of everyone's biggest question. I honestly don't know what to expect. I think people still have a lot of questions. There's still a lot of hesitancy, and there's a whole lot of pandemic fatigue around COVID-19 right now.
By the way, you can find available new COVID shots near you by going to vaccines.gov. Still ahead, our guest shares her predictions for this year's flu season and the specific date she recommends you get your flu shot by. Plus, what to know about the first ever RSV vaccine. But first, a quick break for our sponsors. My husband and I are actually in the process of buying a home. And while we are so excited, there are also a lot of costs. So it would have been really nice to be able to consider saving more for that big purchase through my everyday spending. It's possible if I would have known sooner about the Rocket Visa Signature Card. The Rocket Visa Card is actually the first credit card designed for homeownership, allowing you to earn rewards on every single purchase, from dining to travel and everything in between. And not only can you redeem your rewards for up to 5% cash back toward closing costs and a down payment when you buy a home with Rocket Mortgage, but you can also earn 2% cash back toward your Rocket Mortgage balance after you buy a home. Apply for the Rocket Visa Card today at rocketcard.com/newsworthy and get up to 5% cash back on every purchase toward a new loan with Rocket Mortgage. rocketcard.com/newsworthy for up to 5% cash back toward your new home from Rocket Mortgage when you're approved. rocketcard.com/newsworthy. All Rocket Visa signature cards are powered by Deserve and issued by Celtic Bank, a Utah-chartered industrial bank member FDIC. Terms and conditions apply. Visit www.rocketcard.com to learn more. This episode is also brought to you by Nutrafol. Did you know that hair thinning will happen to about 1 in 2 women? Yeah, about half of women. So if it's something you've ever dealt with, you're not alone. It's actually normal. And Nutrafol helps women address it from within with science-backed supplements. As in, a clinical study showed 86% of women reported improved hair growth after taking Nutrafol Women's Hair Growth Supplement for 6 months. No wonder it's actually the #1 dermatologist-recommended hair growth supplement. In fact, my own dermatologist recommended it a while back. I was a few months postpartum, and all the hormone changes, stress, and whatever else was taking a toll on my hair. So I took Nutrafol postpartum and really noticed improved hair growth and just healthier, shinier hair. And there's a formula for everyone here, from postpartum to menopause to plant-based lifestyles and more. Take the first step to visibly thicker, healthier hair. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month's subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code NEWSWORTHY. Find out why over 4,000 healthcare professionals recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol, Nutrafol.com with the promo code NEWSWORTHY. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code NEWSWORTHY. All right, now back to our conversation. Let's shift a little bit to talk about flu. You've mentioned it a few times. What predictions or what data do you have so far for this year's flu season? What are you expecting?
Flu season's a bit different because in the Northern Hemisphere, like us in the United States, we can rely and look at how the Southern Hemisphere's flu season went because their flu season's a couple months before ours. And they had a pretty middle-of-the-road flu season. It was earlier than pre-pandemic, just like we saw last year, but it wasn't particularly severe. And the even better news is we saw that the flu vaccines worked pretty darn well in the Southern Hemisphere. And so it seems like a good match this year.
And what's your opinion on getting COVID and flu shots together this year, as well as the best timing for each one of those?
You can get the flu vaccine and COVID-19 vaccine at the same visit. It is recommended to administer in different arms. And there have been studies on the safety and effectiveness of co-administration of the two vaccines. I would encourage co-administration, especially if it's challenging for people to get to a doctor's office or pharmacy like older Americans.
If it makes people feel better to get it separately and to put some time between the two, do you have a recommendation of which one should be first? And then we'll talk about, the timing, the best timing to get these types of shots so that they last all season.
Flu vaccines wane particularly faster among older Americans. And so the general rule of thumb is for older Americans to get their flu vaccine in October. And I agree with that. I think that as long as you get your flu vaccine before Halloween, you're in pretty good shape for flu season this year. COVID is a whole lot more challenging because many different people are having infections. Some people had vaccinations over the summer because they all of a sudden were eligible. And we don't really have predictable timing of a COVID-19 wave.
Finally, there is RSV. It was a very rough season last year for RSV. What do you expect this year for that one? And what impact do you expect the new RSV vaccine, which I believe is only for seniors and pregnant women, to have, if any?
RSV is no joke, particularly among those under 5 years old and older Americans. The really exciting thing about this fall is it's the first time we've had protection against the big three, right? COVID, flu, and RSV, which is huge. We do have a couple tools in our toolkit for RSV this fall. One you mentioned is a vaccine for those over 60. These vaccines wane very slowly, so I would suggest getting one today. It'll last throughout the season and even maybe into next season. The other thing we have coming down the pipeline, it's not available yet, but is an RSV vaccine for pregnant people to really help newborns against RSV, which are the highest risk for severe RSV disease. And then the third tool we have is an RSV medication for infants. It's called a monoclonal antibody, and all infants under 8 months old should get this. And those children between 8 months and 19 months should also get it if they're high risk. This medication is not available yet either, but the manufacturer has said that it should be available this season, and then that protection lasts about 4 to 6 months.
Overall, are you expecting what's, been called in the headlines the tripledemic with COVID, flu, and RSV? What's the impact of a so-called tripledemic? And do you think that kind of that title is hype, or is there legitimacy to it?
I think there's legitimacy to it, but I'm also an epidemiologist. So I may be a little biased, but yeah, I'm not going to lie, it's a concern in a lot of the back of our minds. Particularly, we do not want flu, RSV, and COVID peaking at the same time because it's going to overwhelm our hospital systems. Even pre-pandemic, a bad flu season would overwhelm our hospital systems. And now we have a new virus in our repertoire of threats and that haven't necessarily increased capacity. And in fact, I think our capacity has decreased because of burnout and so many healthcare professionals leaving the field. And so that is a legitimate concern. No one knows how this fall is going to roll out, but all we can hope is that these waves are staggered.
Any final thoughts as we enter this season and these vaccines are now available?
I think my bottom line is that we have a ton of tools that can help us, not only individuals, but help our communities and healthcare systems and people at risk around us. And I really encourage everyone to get all the vaccines they're eligible for. My family certainly will, and it will no doubt help.
Well, thank you, as always, to epidemiologist Dr. Katelyn Jetelina for breaking down the key things to know about COVID, flu, and RSV this fall season. For more of her analysis, subscribe to her Substack newsletter called Your Local Epidemiologist. And as always, if you found the information useful or interesting, please be sure to share it with a friend. Our special edition episodes come out every Saturday, and our regular 10-minute news roundups are available every weekday morning, keeping you in the know about the daily headlines. So we'll be back on Monday. But first, if you're looking for another podcast to listen to this weekend, I do have a recommendation for you. It's called The Jordan Harbinger Show. It's won a bunch of podcast awards for good reason. I know Jordan personally, and he is a great interviewer. He goes in depth with all types of fascinating guests, like the conversation he had with an undercover FBI agent who builds relationships with potential terrorists, or another episode that tells the story of a cinematographer who discovered a lost city in the jungle and made one of the most important archaeological finds of the century. He's also had more well-known names on the show, from Matthew McConaughey and Ludacris to LinkedIn founder Reid Hoffman and more. Jordan has a gift for getting his guests to reveal never-been-heard-before stories and insights so we can all learn from their unique superpowers. He also has other helpful types of episodes like how to quit your job the right way. So go check it out. Search The Jordan Harbinger Show. That's Harbinger, H-A-R-B as in boy, I-N as in Nancy, G-E-R. Wherever you listen to podcasts, add it to your playlist for After the Newsworthy when you need something to listen to that's longer than 10 minutes. We hope you love it. All right, we'll catch you up on more news to know on Monday. Until then, have a great weekend.